Alright, response video to Matt, Thou Art That, who I really haven't bothered with in a long time because he really doesn't say anything reasonable ever anymore. I mean, not even like one sentence of something connected to anything real. He's turned everything into metaphors and ghosts and spirits and fog, and nothing has anything to do with anything in anybody's real world. It's all mumbo jumbo to the, whatever, with that little tiny number, mumbo jumbo times like 58 or something. Big, huge amounts of mumbo jumbo. So anyway, he has touched upon the subject of anti-natalism. I knew it was coming eventually. He'd have to deal with it. And he's dealt with it by just running away. So I only listened to half his video, and it was just like, oh, come on, I can't put up with this. I'm going to have to reply. So I'm going to reply.
It seems like a silly conversation to be having because...
yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. You're going to talk about the most important question, which is evaluating whether 4 billion years ago an event took place where a piece of chemistry acquired the capacity to reproduce. And then some halfway through that process of evolution, it acquired this capacity to be harmed, to say ouch. And now we're just evaluating whether these were necessarily pure events, like they were somehow innately good, or whether they had somehow might have a negative character to them, and that we might be caught up in something that has absolutely no real mission statement. And that comes at this completely preposterous waste. And so it is like analogizing to anything else in our lives. If you had a car and you had to put 500 gallons of gas in it to move it 4 feet, you might ask some questions. Is this car worth having? Is there some way I can fix this so it does better than that? Because this isn't good enough. And it's not really hard to say this isn't good enough. And we sort of know that the conversation about how ungood enough it is would have happened centuries ago if it wasn't for religion. That religion has stifled conversation, it has destroyed our capacity to evaluate, and it's only when we get free of that sick fog that we're able to start looking around and saying, where the fuck are we, and what is this reality really worth? Now that's the real context. If you're going to say that's not the real context, then give me your alternative explanation that has something to do with something real and not something to do with a pink unicorn.
Natalism is the idea that we should reproduce, right? We should bring new beings, new persons into existence through procreation. Anti-natalism is the idea that, well, if the universe is, life on Earth at least, is fundamentally negative, if there's always...
yeah, but it's fundamentally inefficient, where it creates enough negative experience, okay? It takes 500 gallons of gas, and it only produces 4 feet of positive experience, truly positive, constructive, useful, truly valuable, cherishable perfection of experience, whatever you want to describe it as. If it's not doing anything but satisfying some negative condition, yeah, then it's worthy of evaluation. And I don't think there's any way you can rationally evaluate it and come up with some default excuse to defend it. Saying it has a pretty color or it's a nice shape just doesn't defend the fact that it is not functioning.
It's going always to be basically a situation of suffering.
Well, it's not always. That's not really the argument. The point is, though, that it will consume a ton of it. All right? Life is death, so we can associate death with the condition of being alive. Death is associated with suffering, with a deconstruction of your identity, your existence. Even your brain can die while you're still alive, destroy everything that you were, and turn you into a fucking imbecile. I mean, it's insidious vicious. The parasites will eat you. The other living things will cannibalize you before you're dead.
Natalist argues that we shouldn't bring new persons into existence. We shouldn't procreate.
Right. There's two, and there's one point I don't think you're going to get to. And there's two ways to look at this. Yeah, it's a bad experiment. Frankenstein experiment, there's really no justification. Nobody's asking Dr. Frankenstein to do the experiment. We don't need the experiment. We don't want the experiment. There's just no use for this experiment. The other argument to be made is that we, in conducting the experiment, are going to impose all the liabilities of the experiment on what we will classify as the losers. And the benefits will go to some other class called the winners. And there's nothing distinguishing them before they end up falling into one of those categories. And that kind of sloppiness and recklessness and unearned punishment is not justifiable. You can't put that in many innocent people in jail and justify your justice system. If your justice system has a 25% failure rate, then it's too high a failure rate to justify having the system. And that's the problem with this life game. By its very nature, we can't control the imposition of the failure. And that makes it, until you fix that, until you can create immunity to psychologies that don't deserve it, who wouldn't endorse it, who wouldn't vote for the roller coaster. You can't put the people who voted against the roller coaster on the roller coaster.
I think that the reason I find it silly is because it's assuming that we have the free will over and above our biological inheritance.
Well, this is just the silliest of the arguments. This is Piro's argument that somehow we can't rationally and logically understand how our biology works and interrupt the incidental consequence of procreation that comes with our sexual desire. I mean, evolution has gamed us, okay, because we were ignorant. It's gamed all the animals. They're not procreating, Matt. They're having sex. That's all they want out of it, okay? None of them has the ambition that they're creating babies. They have the ambition that they're going to gain sexual gratification. They're going to satisfy an impulse, all right? And the impulse isn't to have a next generation. And so this is just a nonsense argument from nature, and you're making an argument from nature, and you're not even making it accurately, okay? We have no innate instinct or desire to procreate. We have a desire to have sex, and with a tiny bit of knowledge, you can separate sex from procreation. You only need a tiny bit of knowledge to understand what a barrier is and to create one to sperm.
That are sexed, that are male and female. And in order to continue to exist as a species, we're going to have to reproduce, right?
Yeah, well, this is like duh, and this is the argument, whether or not we should continue. So this presumption that somehow we take our marching orders from a DNA molecule, again, you're going to have to defend that default state, that somehow the DNA molecule has an authority. Where's its authority? What college did it go to? Where is it granted this default presumption that it knows what it's doing, and we, with the intelligence, with the knowledge, with the information, are the ones that somehow don't understand that we're supposed to be obedient?
Saying you're an anti-natalist is something like saying that you as an individual could decide not to have sex, or at least not to have a child.
Well, this is stupid. So if there's a concept like murder, I as an individual could decide not to be a murderer, but I can't do anything about stopping other people from being murderers. Or I as an individual could decide not to make a nuclear device on my porch and blow the world up, but I can't stop other people from making one on their porch and blowing the world up. I mean, this is just nonsense. Okay, we certainly have a right to create social policy that defines right and wrong. And if we can figure out through just a tiny bit of rational 1 + 1 = 2 kind of logic that life really hasn't defended itself yet, and until it is defended, it's not something we should be sustaining or subsidizing or promoting. Not that tricky.
When individuals do decide not to have sex, they become priests and decide not to have children, even if they are going to have sex. So it's
yeah, certainly, that's right. And I'd argue that most sexual encounters don't lead to babies, and they do so quite deliberately.
Level, it's really not possible. We would no longer be biological entities if we were capable of not having children.
Oh, whatever. It's not making us incapable. You don't change the. You're like saying that somebody's a subhuman now. You've just basically classified every human being who's infertile as some kind of subhuman. That somehow they've lost their identity as a feeling, experiencing being because they're infertile. I mean, that's absolutely nonsense. There's no functionality. There's no obligation for any part of my essence that has any obligation to complete some process of procreation. Absolutely nothing, Matt. I'm not. My life is not in any way diminished or made dysfunctional because I haven't seeded a woman. I mean, that's just idiotic.
Species. It's inevitable that enough human beings, Homo sapiens, will have a child.
Well, says you, right? So all you're basically saying is that there's no way we can control human behavior. That there's no way that a meme can pass on from one person to another person. That people could become ideologues or devoted to a cause or a principle or an ideal, and yet you're here preaching on the internet in your little brown robe, you know, your theology, as if you think there's some reason to do that, as if you think there's some way you can persuade people to change behavior. I mean, no friggin' idyllic future is even possible without some sort of consensus of opinion and or consensus of behavior and some willingness not to break the rules or not to break those ideals. So this idea that somehow we can do nothing to control irresponsibility in human beings is bullshit.
That the species will continue. That's not going to be the reason we're going to go extinct, at least, if we do.
Again, so where again do I find your? Do you have on a wall somewhere I have the perfect crystal balls, documentation that somehow yeah, this is crap. You can't make these absolute statements that that's not possible. I'm more valid in making my arguments about the futility of your quest for any kind of future that won't be dismal and dark and disgusting, because you won't acquiesce to the basic fact that life is by its very nature fail, because it is about individual selfish organisms, and they will not do what's required to function, to gain enough efficiency to maintain themselves.
Rather than try to say I'm for birth or against birth, I would say that birth is written into the very functioning of the universe.
Yeah, right. I mean, so what's the point? And even if it was, even if that metaphorical useless mush, where now you've compared a very isolated bit of rust on a planet that's doing this evolution thing, to now the functionality of the entire universe, which is kind of silly, because they are different things, they're different mechanics. Beyond that being silly, let's say it was true, and let's say you stopped the universe from birthing. What would be the harm? The other universe somewhere would cry? No, that's the catch here. Is the whole thing it doesn't have any obligation to produce anything that we, as sentient beings with a logical brain that understands value, could even make any could have any connection to at all. The universe has no sense of value. It can't recognize its own failure. It couldn't recognize its own success. It can't judge value. It can't judge. We can judge. The universe can't judge. Why wouldn't we, who have the knowledge and the capacity to judge, do the judging and not sit there and be obedient to a mechanism and say we're going to be obedient only because it was here first? I mean, that's kind of a silly notion.
And to the end, because when birth stops happening, there's no more universe.
Oh my.
And part of part of the reason for this extreme response, I think, is that I'm not limiting the universe to the human. I think that the human isn't the only creature that gives birth and that has the freedom to, in some sense, decide whether or not it's going to continue existing. I think every creature that there is continues to exist because it enjoys existence.
Okay, so this is just preposterous nonsense. I don't even know what ass you pulled this out of. I mean, you have to find a huge, like an elephant's ass or something, to pull something this monstrously crazy out of. So, yeah, where do you get this from? Where's any evidence? Where's even any kind of logical proof or argumentation or demonstration that any single animal has any such notion in their fucking head? Where do you get that from? I mean, point me to one animal that has ever contemplated procreation and extinction. Point me to one.
It's not simply that pre-human or non-human life doesn't want to exist.
Oh, this is again, is idiotic. They have no free will. We don't have free will, Matt. Newsflash. And they certainly have no knowledge context. They have no information making it even possible for them to judge or evaluate the value of their entire life. And for you to assume because they survive, because they're addicted and caught up in a desire mechanism, that somehow that means they're saying, please, sir, give me some more. Well, that's just you imposing upon them. I mean, that's just so fucking rude of you to assume that because they are attempting to find comfort, that they are implying they think the game is worth playing, that they enjoyed watching their kittens die, and they enjoyed running into the fire to save them, or they enjoyed and that they would do it all over again if given the choice. And for you to assume that that's what it means because they didn't figure out how to build a gun and blow their brains out is just kind of silly.
That, somehow it could or would cease existing if the net impact of living were negative. I think.
Yeah, if they could understand that kind of context, like I said, you'd have to inform them before they could give you an answer, wouldn't you? And why do you assume that their answer would be as ridiculous as you addicts? Why would you assume that they wouldn't be able to be smart enough to say, oh yeah, I really understand, I've just been chasing selfish bullshit desires created as a delusion in my consciousness. The cheese is synthetic, it is a pile of crap, the suffering was real and a waste, and so why would I engage in this behavior a second time around? Why would I do this over and over? It's a stupid mechanism.
Exhaust. From the very first moment molecules became protoplasm or some form of single-celled genetically replicating organism, from that very first moment, there was an increase in enjoyment, an increase in the intensity.
Yeah, so there's absolutely nothing here. This is just this is as pink glitter unicorn as you can possibly invent. You have no evidence of that whatsoever. You can't make one rational demonstration of why anybody with a rational brain would believe that a DNA molecule enjoys living. I mean, that is just preposterous crap.
Of matter's experience of itself, and an increase in intensity, and an increase in goodness and beauty.
Oh, don't even, use words like beauty to describe functionality and you will go nowhere. So again, that's just like saying, okay, it doesn't matter whether the car runs, it doesn't matter whether the car goes anywhere, as long as it's a nice paint job, yeah, it's a great car. I mean, it's just a pile of shit. Every perception you have of beauty is built on a bunch of subjective conditioning that has absolutely no real core meaning or integrity. It's just incidental, culturally imposed bullshit.
The reason there is still a universe is because it was enjoyable for the universe to continue becoming what it was.
Oh yeah, again, well, so this is just such a pile of shit. I mean, this is worse than, Christians make more rational statements in defense of their heaven and gods than you're making with this crap. You've just completely invented these sentences out of absolutely nothing. You've just said it because, well, it sounds like fun. I mean, you just might as well write fairy tales. Do it overtly. Just write fairy tales. This has nothing to do with reality.
So the fact that we are here as human beings is the testament to the fact that the universe has decided to be here, that all of the creatures prior to us have decided to procreate or to recreate.
Oh, right. So all those billions and billions of animals in their tiny cages, in our slaughter industry, for your little meat sandwich, they all chose to be slaves to our addiction. Yeah, fuck you.
To continue existing. And I think it's silly for us to assume we could somehow stop that process from taking place.
Oh yeah, it's silly to think that we could wear a condom. Again, I'm not going to make these arguments. All you're saying is that somehow people can't have an idea, and that idea can't spread to other people, and that somehow that sooner or later that human beings could coalesce on an idea like the world is round, and it could be like a 99.99% understanding, and only a weird, perverse, fucktarded idiot wouldn't get it. Alright, now these are complex truths about reality, but I'm going to argue that the biggest obstacle to people getting the truth, okay, are the lies that are injected in their heads by all you birthers and you fucking Gaias and you fucking religious nuts. You fucking make people retarded. You fill their head full of delusions and fables and nonsense and rubbish. And so their brain doesn't fucking do logic. And it's only until they're free of that mumbo jumbo that they can see the obvious. Because they're not distorted. They don't have your crooked distortion glasses on, your fairy tale glasses. And that's why people like myself could understand at 8 years old what I'm having to explain to you fuckers. Okay, is that if you look at this objectively, if you look at this with no personal bias, with outside of your personal desire, you can see that it's fucking rubbish. That you wouldn't be that, you wouldn't be that, you wouldn't do that, you wouldn't have that, you wouldn't go near any of it if you had a e-ticket and you could choose what fucking bullshit game to ride. You wouldn't ride any of those fucking rides. So this is all a big pile of crap.
The process of coming to experience a world is enjoyable. So not only is anti-natalism, I think, impossible on the ontological level, I think it's also...
Yeah, well, you have no credibility in telling anybody what's possible or impossible. Because like I said, you're the one saying that the universe wants. You're saying that microbes want. You're saying DNA molecules want. I mean, you have no credibility. So your suggestion that you somehow have logically deduced that somehow there's no formulatic way that this future could ever exist. Well, I'm going to argue you describe to me your fucking future, alright? And I will explain to you why it's not going to happen. And I think I'm going to be able to do a more credible job than you.
experientially naive in that at a certain level, experience is suffering, but at a deeper level, if you really consider the evidence as it is arrayed before you, as this universe, as this growth.
Yeah, he's talking about evidence. Isn't that amazing? What is your evidence for a microbe's feeling, wanting, desiring, having ambition? What is your evidence for that?
To realize that it exists because it's good. It isn't necessarily good because it exists.
Oh, yeah, isn't that interesting? It's not necessarily good because it exists because it's good. And so now he's going to play word games. Like somehow just because he flipped the words backwards, that somehow now he's saying something different. They're both the same statement. You're saying that somehow it's good, and it's not good because I've evaluated and drawn the rational conclusion that it's good. You're just saying that's the default.
If you're familiar with Leibniz, he had this idea that we must live in the best of all possible worlds. It must be good just because it exists. I'm saying it exists, and therefore it must be good. It is the good manifest. The universe is necessarily the good. It's only standard for judging what might be good versus what might not be good.
Yeah, how does anybody make sense out of that? Threw that in the air. Hey, that was a good thing. Knock that can over. That's a good thing. Yeah. Stick this in my eye. Oh, yeah, that probably won't be a good thing. I think I'll pass on that one. This is just absolute rubbish.
To even do cosmology, we're already making a moral assumption that the reason we're going to study the universe scientifically, the universe as a whole scientifically, is because we find it good.
Oh, please. I mean, where do you get this crap? Where do you get this crap? I mean, so because somebody figures out how to remove an infected appendix, they're doing it because they think appendixes are good. I mean, this is just absolute, oh, man. Oh, revolting nonsense.
Example that is being set for our own behavior as microcosmic beings or organisms. So natalism is impossible metaphysically and unethical, I think.
Oh yeah, no, it's much more ethical to take a risk with somebody else's welfare. All right, you're not going to address any of these arguments, right? You're not going to address any of the arguments that there's no necessity to perform this act. So like a policeman rushing to a scene of an accident, yeah, you can justify rushing because there's an accident and you might save somebody from harm. So you'll take a risk. What's the harm that's going to be experienced if somebody doesn't have a child, doesn't inject another human being into the future? What part of the universe will weep, Matt? Explain to me what kind of pain and suffering will be endured by the universe because there isn't little fucking maggot humans on planet fucking Earth. I mean, are all the planets void of a DNA molecule? Are they all causing the universe pain because they don't have this fucking rust on them? This fucking bizarre fungus growing on them? Because there's no Tyrannosauruses on Mars. Mars is diminished and the universe is aching. I mean, this is just such a pile of shit.
It means participating in the larger course of events as they exist in our universe now. And anti-natalism is I wouldn't go so far to say it's evil, but as Alfred North Whitehead put it, evil is novelty in the wrong season.
Oh, yeah, well, whatever. You're the imposer, so you're obviously the evil, okay? You think, because you have a delusion in your head, you haven't backed up with a single goddamn rational sentence, that you have a right to impose on something else. To play fucking God, make a determination that you will perpetuate a maze game merely because you fell upon it. It's like finding a goddamn maze game in the middle of the woods, and it's got a bunch of rats in it. It's got guillotines, it's got snatch traps, it's got all kinds of fucking shit that's ripping these little rats to pieces every day. And it keeps getting perpetually fed by this breeding machine that just forces more rats into the maze. And you see it, and you look at it, and then you just walk the fuck away. No, you're the evil motherfucker.
New. That is so against the grain, so contrary to the inherited situation that it destroys that situation.
Oh yeah, it's just against your little pink balloon fairy tales, okay? Yes, it's completely against the Three Pigs, Goldilocks and the Bears, Snow White. Yeah, it's against all of that nonsense and rubbish. Your little henny penny Teletubby bullshit philosophy that's founded on not one rational fucking sentence.
Ends up inhibiting growth or unweaving achievements of complexity.
Right. Achievements of complexity, not in physical reality anymore, just in idea. Okay, and again, the only complexity that we're achieving is unraveling the bullshit. When you cut us down and get rid of the bullshit, the God delusion, alright, and look at this rationally, it's quite clear that this is just a fucking senseless infestation. Consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, addiction. There's no other elements, Matt. That's all it's made of. Alright, your love and your beauty is all addictive psychology. It has nothing to do with anything real merit. It just has to do with your need. You are a need machine, and you're a need that doesn't need to exist. And until you come up with some rational argument why need needs to exist, you have no argument.
Beauty and the goodness of experiments. By trying to do something new too quickly or too soon. You know, that's what evil would be. So ethics is always going to be.
Well, evil is that there is no justice, and people have to pray to the clouds for hope of it. Okay, but if there was justice, then people like you, all right, should get ALS. You should be the ones paying the price. You should get the worst seat on the fucking roller coaster. If you're going to endorse the ride, you're going to endorse the risk, it should all fall on your fucking head. It's that fucking simple. That would be justice. And it is truly evil of the universe that it doesn't impose that justice.
It's creating what's happening. Not as if you don't have the capacity to steer it in a more positive direction if you don't like what has happened, but you always have to say yes to what you're given.
You have to say yes. No, you can say no. We've stopped a lot of what we were given by nature. We stopped a lot of stupid, idiotic human tricks, and have become, we oblige human beings to be civilized in a lot of respects. And this is just one more respect that maybe if you're going to do biological experiments and impose life on sentient beings and play with their destiny, that maybe you ought to qualify yourself before you do that.
I think. So that's why natalism.
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, you calling anybody else's philosophy or ideas silly is as silly as it gets. Okay, your entire philosophy is made out of silly mumbo motherfucking jumbo. It has no rational continuity. It has no connection to anything that we know to be real. You're just making this crap up because it sounds like fun. It's just Alice in Wonderland bullshit. It is not real. It's not connected to anything we're living in for real. It's just a fucking lunatic fable you've told yourself. You're just changing everything in the world to gingerbread and marshmallow and Candyland bullshit. You are as perverse to anything rational and logical as a deluded human can get. Yes, okay, you're not physically doing something overtly harmful like microwaving babies, but you are, in theory, insane. Yeah, okay, good. Fuck you. Silly.